Then I was fertilized and became wise. I truly grew and thrived. From a word to a word, I was led to a word. From a deed to a deed, I was led to a deed. The children of Europe, raised in her fire and fury, have a history unequaled. Nowhere has witnessed such depths of tragedy or heights of glory. Mimmersbrunner is dedicated to celebrating both Europe and her children, to stir the sacred waters that animate, and to bring the ancient ways back to the forefront of the European mind. Through our work, we wish to rekindle those ancient embers of the European fire, and to once again hold our ancestors and their deeds in the reverence they deserve. To know your ancestors is to know yourself. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining me tonight. Now, I'd just like to say a few things. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter show tonight. I've been a little bit busy lately. A lot going on my end. A lot going on in my personal business affairs, at least, to try and keep this running at full speed. So I've had to put in a lot of effort in other areas of my life to try and, like I say, keep this running and keep the time that I can keep available for this, writing the scripts, etc., and doing the live streams. Thanks for joining us. I see a lot of good people in there, in the chat already, and some interesting conversation going on about the subject tonight, which is an interesting one. Now, before I get into that, I'd just like to state a few things. We've got a new channel up, if people didn't know, called Mimmers Council. Now, if you're not into the politics side of things, then I won't bother going over there, but this is going to be a channel that we're going to put our efforts into in a more political front and a more ideas front on the political scene. Because here at Mimmersbrunner, we want to restore and maintain the ancient faiths and our folk. And this is a dual effort. We believe that they are the same battle, but for some, they won't come to our site or they won't watch us here because of their spiritual or religious beliefs. I'll put a link in the description. Greg, I can see some people asking about it. I'm sure somebody out there will. And Spartan Warrior Queen is here. She might be able to find the link for you, but I know Riss will, or Racial Consciousness. I know he can do it. He's already done it. No, so there is a new channel up. Like I said, we're going to be doing videos in a slightly different way than over here at Mimmersbrunner. Obviously, the spiritual core of our work will always remain the same. We are heathens first and foremost, but we love our folk, all of them, even those that do not share our views, even those that are spiritually different to us, or even opinion different to us, and we want them to exist. And we want them to be healthy and well. And that's going to be something we're going to be talking about tonight a little bit. Well, the healthy and well bit. So yeah, if you do want to check that out, check out the link that's being put up. There's a few people linking it now. And it should be interesting to see what reaction we get from there, see how our work goes. Our first video was up in support of some Laura Towler's work and Mark Collette's work on We Were Never Asked. I thought that was a really good little survey they did, where they went to the British public and asked them their opinions on immigration. And they got some interesting results that you won't see in the mainstream media. And we wanted to do a little bit to support that effort. Hollander did the music as always, and Riz put together the beautiful visuals. Well, beautiful, not necessarily in this case, but it come together in a way, and I wrote the words as always. But and also, I don't know if Mother Hen's there. She might have given up on us over at DLive because I promised to see her live stream last Wednesday and I forgot. And I do apologize. Well, I didn't forget actually. I was just absolutely exhausted. Been doing a lot of work. To give people a sneak peek actually, because I've got loads here. Been casting. I don't know how well they'll show up. These are not polished, but I've been working on some new designs for. This is not going to focus. For the pendants front. That is based on a Nordic Bronze Age razor, and it has some engravings that I did on it. I don't know if you can't really see. Oh, did it want to focus? No. I'll get some photos up at some point anyway. But yeah, I finally found a tool that I'm very happy engraving with, so I'm hoping to get a lot of designs out there. And a quick note before we move on, my Twitter account is locked at the moment. I'm hoping to unlock it soon. So if anybody's left me messages there or anything of that sort, I cannot reply at the moment. And I do apologise for that. So there won't be any posts at the moment for a little bit. Like I say, I do apologise for that. It's a bit of an error on my part. I don't have a mobile phone. It might sound very strange. I had a throwaway one that I used to operate the internet or operate lots of things these days because you can't hardly do anything without a mobile phone. But since I moved house last year, I don't know where it's gone. So I'm gonna have to get a new one. And once I do get a new one, I'll get that Twitter account unlocked. Now to the show tonight. Like I say, it's going to be a little bit briefer than normal, and we're only going to be covering the basics, very basics of the swastika. It's a very interesting symbol, and I could do shows on just the words alone, and that's something we'll come to later to see if that's something people might want. But like last week, I'm going to do a little disclaimer. What I present here is just some information. You can take it or you can leave it. As I said last week, our symbols and our faith is very personal to us. And it is our personal relationship with our faith that strengthens it, our personal seeking. So I'm not here to tell people what to think. I'm not here to tell people how to think. I'm here to just share some information that may help you, enlighten you, or help in your research, or you can just dismiss it. It's totally up to you. Like I say, I'm only here as a messenger of things that I have found in my personal search. But like I say, we're going to keep it quite basic tonight because it's such a massive subject. If there's interest, we'll follow it up with something a bit more in depth probably. But we'll see how people feel about this show. Because I know it's a very touchy subject for many. Many are scared about it because of the way it's treated in the modern world. But it is an ancient symbol. It is very much European. And is used in pretty much every single European society. We'll see a little bit of that tonight that has ever been. We're going to take a look at it, trace it through history a little bit and see what we can find. And this will be archaeological finds. Now a little disclaimer there too. Remember, most of the archaeological record is gone. What we have is a tiny fraction, and the further back in time you go, the less you have. This will become quite evident with the first two and the distance between them. And this is important to remember when people say, where did it come from first? Where we can only go on the archaeological record to say for certain it was there at this certain point in time. Does that mean it was the first place? No. It just means it's the first place we have found it in a physical sense. This symbol is very ancient, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes back a lot further than the first find that is going to be on our list. But like I say, we can only go with what we can find and what we can see. It'd be great to have the whole complete archaeological record of our history, but that's not how it works. Sadly. Like I say, I mean, I often wonder how many, for every Bronze Age axe head we have, how many we've lost. it's got to be thousands to one, right? And that's just the Bronze Age. So like I say, this will be a basic look, but I've got some slides to help us go through this. So let's hit a fancy button and go to our slides and see where they're at. There we go. Now, this is the first slide, and this is the mezzine dig site, or mezzine. I've seen it spelt both ways. I'm not sure which is the correct way, which one is anglicised, one maybe more Ukrainian. This is a site in the Ukraine. Now, this is a very, very old site. Its earliest occupation dates back to 27,000 BC. So that's 29,000 years ago, nearly 30,000 years ago. This is the Gravitian period. Never really know how to explain that. And moving into the Gravitian. You can please correct me on this. And I'm terrible at some pronunciation, so I do apologise for those beforehand, because we're going to be looking at a few places in Eastern Europe today that I may not be able to pronounce quite correctly. But anyway, to the site, like I say, dates its earliest finds are about 30,000 years ago, 29,000 years ago. The latest finds there, I think, are about 13,000 BC, so 15,000 years ago. Now, dating objects from there is very hard because of the long lifespan of this site. And the dates, by the way, were got from mammoth bones, which, as you can see in these pictures here, there was a lot of mammoth bones. In the top right there is a mammoth bone hut, or a reconstruction of one. That one was actually found in Germany. This is not from the mezzine site, but it is very similar in construction. But the mezzine site was a very interesting place, and in the bottom right there you can see some of the mammoth bone carvings. Now, we're going to get to the swastika very soon, so don't worry. But that top one there is a mother goddess. It's hard to tell because of its very stylistic shape. But it is a mother goddess. I do believe the one on the bottom right is, and I'm not sure what the one in the bottom left is. But like I say, this was a site primarily of mammoth bone huts. And like I say, they found objects dating from the mammoth bones. Like I say, they date from about 29,000 years ago to 15,000 years ago. So that's a span of 14,000 years this site was occupied. Now, this is, of course, the reason I'm talking about this is the origin of the earliest archaeological find of a swastika. Now, as I said at the beginning, please, if people think it's somewhere else and was somewhere else older, I'm not saying this is the origin. What I am saying is this is the first place we have archaeological evidence of the swastika. That's all. I'll go to slide 2 here, and this is the swastika in question, or swastikas. Under that bird that's carved out of a mammoth bone, it's hard to see on the original, but an artist's impression there taken from it, we can see very clearly what is recognisable as a swastika. It's a little bit swirly, but we're going to look at that later and see how the swirls and the swastika are, well, we can see how in later cultures they were interchangeable, actually, pretty much. And there's actually some very good examples of that. And that in the bottom right there is a mammoth bone bracelet, believe it or not. Again, with a swastika type pattern, it looks more like a three-pronged swastika, more like a Triskelion that you would find in the Celtic worlds, but more angular. But like I say, this is the earliest archaeological find. Now, there's a lot of arguments, especially with the Indian and European communities, of where it started. They claim it was there earlier, and some Europeans claim it was here earlier. At the moment, the archaeological evidence vastly is in favour of Europe. Not just because of this find, but that does not mean that it was not in the Indian subcontinent very early, and a lot earlier than we found it. special, and I would probably hesitate to guess it was there a lot earlier than our earliest find from the Indian subcontinent. But like I say, these are, by the way, these are given where they were found, basically. They estimate that these are anywhere between 16,000 BC, so 18,000 years ago, and 13,000 BC, so 15,000 years ago. As always, they've been conservative with their estimates on these. I don't think they've actually dated these bones specifically. I couldn't find that information anywhere. Some of this stuff is very hard to find because it's in Eastern Europe and I don't speak any Slavic languages or Eastern European languages at all. Which makes it very hard to find on the English internet, especially any scholarly articles that are free to view. Although I have joined, thanks to some of the support here, I have joined some academic sites to try and get information on these firsthand without having to try and cycle through second-hand information. So I do appreciate the donations there. Now we'll move a little bit, well, quite a bit forward in time actually, to the frog swastikas, as they're called. Now, these are quite interesting. And this just, there's actually a great example here of how literal some of the academics can be with this kind of information. These, if you cover half of one of them up with your hand, they kind of look like the back end of a frog. Now, whilst they might look like a back end of a frog, or frog's legs, as the archaeologists put them, I don't believe they are frogs, but the literal minds of the archaeologists involved in the dig site, and these are from Bulgaria, by the way. They're in Sofia, but a certain area of Sofia called Slatina. Well, one of them is, sorry. I did put the other one here, and I'm not sure if I've... The other one is from Kardzali. The Slatina one is the one on the right. The Kardzali one is the one on the left. And like I say, the archaeologists consider them frog's legs, maybe because they're jade. They're made of jade, they're green, and they look a little bit like frog's legs, but then they've made their own hypothesis of the fact that they're frog's legs. Now, clearly, anybody with eyes can see that those frog's legs have little mounds in a strange place because they're eyes, and they're clearly ahead of something. Now, your first instance thought might be serpents, and that is possible. Could also be birds. And birds are very important, as we saw in the original one. The original swastika was underneath a bird. And this could be birds, but I mean, it's open to interpretation. They're very stylized, so it's very hard to just say they're birds or... But I definitely don't believe they're frog's legs. The archaeologists looked at some amphibious type worship, but we know that the one on the right from Slatina was found buried in the what is it called? The threshold of the house. So it was obviously a spiritual symbol. Burying things in the threshold of the house has happened throughout history, right up into the Middle Ages, where little potions were buried to ward away evil. So these, so they would definitely have some religious symbology. Now, something I like to point out with these early finds is that we don't have much to go on. There's not much context. Like those finds earlier that were from very early. We can't really... they're on a bird, and that's all we've got. We have no context other than that. Now, I haven't said here, but these are from 6000 BC. So these are possibly 8 to 10,000 years after the first find, even though they're just a little bit south on the map. Which shows you that there's something missing from our archaeological record, which was what I was talking about earlier. And that's important to remember. We have a massive gap there. So it just shows you that when you get back to a certain point of time, when you start going back into the Paleolithic, pre-Mesolithic, finds are very rare. So like I say, we can say the origin is Ukraine by finds, but that's just because we found one there, and it was very lucky to find anything from that period of time, actually. So yeah, these are like nearly, at the very least, 8,000 years later. Even though they're not too far away on the map, like I say. They're in northern Bulgaria mostly, northwestern Bulgaria, I believe, and or western Bulgaria. This whole area is absolutely awash with swastikas, as we're seeing a bit. But yeah, there were 2 others found, but I could not find any photographs of them. Could barely find any writing on them, and any writing I could find was very basic. In fact, it was mostly in relationship to these ones that I could find a little bit more information on. But there's one, like I say, there's those 2, Slatina and Kardzali. Sorry about the pronunciation. There's also one found in Moroslevo in Bulgaria too, and also apparently one in Thessaly in northern Greece. And interesting that Poseidon has just joined us when I mentioned that one was found in northern Greece, in Thessaly. So thanks for joining us, Poseidon. Sorry, just get a drink of tea there. Now, they're all around the same date, and they're all classified as frog swastikas. They're all of this style. So this was obviously a popular style around that time in that area. Now, these are semi-related to Vinca culture, or the Vinca scripts, which we're going to get to in a bit. And also to Kurgan theory, if people want to look into that. I mean, I'm not saying Kurgan theory is, I think it's actually much earlier than Kurgan theory, but Kurgan theory is basically the theory that out of that area that we're going to look at in a while, that's where the Indo-Europeans came from. And this is where they spread their culture, their language, and maybe possibly the swastika. Now there is, like I say, there's some evidence for that, but I'm not going to go into that tonight. And I'm not necessarily saying I believe that. But like I say, one thing I'd like to bring up with these swastikas, especially these types, many are found in what later become Thrace in Bulgaria. And it's actually interesting, I believe that the site where the one on the left was found, Kardzali. No, sorry, it was Moroslevo. This I don't have a picture of, but it's the same style. That was actually a site that was known to the Thracians. And they actually give votive offerings to that very site themselves. So they were honouring their own ancestors in that site. They recognise the site as being very old. And so there are Thracian pits with their own votive offerings to the site of their ancestors, where their ancestors used to live. And this is just a little interesting point of the continuation of culture and the love of our ancestors that I brought up a while ago. Given that these Thracians didn't just bulldoze over their ancestors' ancient lands. When they recognised it as an ancient place of their ancestors, they gave honour to it and respect and reverence, which is very much in keeping with the swastika that was buried there. And the Kardzali, obviously, that was Perikon of Thrace, which was a semi-well-known city because of, I forgot the king's name now, and I'm not going to try and remember, I'll be here all night. But it's an interesting place in Thrace, and obviously the Thracians are a very interesting culture to look at, both for swastikas and much of, very similar to the Celts and the northern Germanic peoples in many ways. Now we'll move to slide 4. I can see someone saying Hal Pepe. Now that's interesting, with these frogs, I was aware of these, and when that whole Pepe thing was going on, I'm surprised nobody brought them up. It's quite weird. Now the Vinca texts, and some other assortments here, but I've just put all Vinca texts because they're all around the same time, or the Vinca scripts. Now this is, well, or symbols. There's a debate to whether this is actually a script. There are better examples of this. I found lots of I found lots of examples of people looking at the script, but not much hard evidence of the script on archaeological finds. So rather than just link book pages where they're telling me about all these symbols, I thought I'd link something that was at least showing me some of the Vinca scripts. Now, the top one there and the one in the middle is actually the Gradesh Nitsa tablet from around 4000 BC, so it's a little bit later because the Vinca scripts are around 6000 BC, but they do continue through. And the older one, the earlier one there, again, we see something that looks like a swastika. You can even see some kind of swirls on the earlier Vinca script. Many Vinca scripts do contain swastika type symbols. You have the simple swastika type symbol that we see on that piece of pottery in the top left there, which I'm not sure exactly where that was found, somewhere in northern Bulgaria again. But we have classical ones of that in the Vinca script, and we also have the feathered ones, which are just like that, but off each of the extended arms, they go inward with like 3 lines. I should have probably put some of the script up to make that a little bit more clear. That bottom piece of pottery there that has the swastikas on was actually found in a cave, and they dated it around to about 5000 BC, but that cave had actually had inhabitants in it since 70,000 BC. They found human or hominid occupation as early back as 70,000 years in that same cave where that was found. Again, we're seeing a continuation of existence around these swastikas. And maybe that was a votive offering to their ancestors, or the ones that came before them in that cave. I mean, obviously we don't know. Like I say, I'd love to find out more information on this. In fact, I'd love to visit Eastern Europe to find out a lot of these. I mean, there's so much great stuff there in Eastern Europe on the swastika. It really is, and there's so little written about it. In the English internet, at least, it's very hard to find information. There's a great opening for anybody from Eastern Europe that can travel around these places quite easily to really do some great blogs on them and some good posts, and they'd definitely get a lot of traction. I'd definitely be interested anyway. But yeah, so these are around the same time, although these are a little bit later than the frog swastikas. They're a little bit earlier. But these pertain to the Vinca text. Again, all in the same type of area. All over there in Eastern Europe, around Bulgaria, Serbia, northern Greece, Romania, that kind of area. There's a hell of a lot of cultures there, by the way, and they change so fast, and they've all got strange names. And I'm not going to try to pronounce many of them. But one to highlight here is a Kukuteni culture. Now, this one I like to highlight because this is about 5000 BC, but this is found almost exactly on the spot of where we saw our first swastika, from the Mezin site. Although obviously this is at least 10,000 years later. So 10,000 years later, in the exact same spot pretty much, we find this culture, which, if you look at that vase second to the right there, has an identical swastika to the one found under the bird. Now, is that a coincidence that 10,000 years later, in the same place, somebody just reinvented the exact same symbol in the exact same way? I find that a little bit hard to believe, personally. It seems that there was some kind of continuation of culture there, but again, we appear to have lost the archaeological record there. But now, interesting, here we have the swirls, and I'd like to check them because they do go hand in hand with this more angular sign. And the goddess is going to become a little bit important soon as well, and for reasons that I'm not going to try and say the swastika is a goddess symbol, but there's an interesting connection which might give us more insight into the swastika. These symbols are very interesting compared to what I was talking about last week as well. the double axe motif and things. But that's definitely something for another time, because as we get into it, we're going to see so many symbols. And actually, when I was doing some research and trying to find a little bit more on this subject before I did it, because I put this together pretty late. I mean, I knew a lot of it anyway, but I wanted to try and get something new, as I always do, for these streams, and obviously grow myself, because I can research this stuff for days on end and not be bored. But obviously, then trying to put it together in some kind of manageable way is hard. But I just wanted to highlight that because, like I say, it's exactly the same place as the mezzanine site. The culture exists around exactly the same place. And it has exactly the same swastika, identical, which I find quite amazing, given the 10,000 year gap. Now, slide 6, we're going to go outside of Europe a little bit to northern Iraq. Around 5,000, 4,000 BC, we start seeing these symbols spread out further than Eastern Europe, and we start to see them in northern Iraq even, although they're slightly different. That one in the centre there is very similar to the Vinca script ones, where they have those 3 towers, but there they have some kind of woman with her hair blowing, it seems. You can't see all of them. The bottom one there has goats. Bottom left, sorry. And the right one there, that is fish. This appears to be fish on the outside and fish in the middle, and possibly some kind of bird. You have legs. It's hard to see. It's like a serpent bird almost, but it's definitely got wings. It's definitely got a tail. So you have a bird and fish. Now, these are symbols that we are going to keep in mind, actually, because they are actually interesting in their own right, especially regarding the swastika, because they bring up a bit of confusion. I know when I first looked at a lot of these symbols, and we're going to get into some of the, like I say, it's hard to get context with the older stuff, with the older finds. They're found very sporadically, and we just have them as they are, and they're not as, they're just patterns. So as we move forward in time, we start to get a little bit more context. We see this in northern Iraq, but there was a lot going on in Europe at this same time period. We're going to look at that as well. But I just wanted to show that this symbol starts to spread at this time. This is when you see its big spread out into the rest of the world. And this is when you start finding swastikas all over the world, actually, around this time, around 4000 BC-ish. And these are like, the Samara culture and the Hassuna culture, which are kind of pre and overlapping Ubaid culture, which is pre-Sumerian, etc. It all gets a bit complicated there. There's a lot of overlapping with those cultures. But it's just to show that they were about. Now, slide 7, we're just going to, and slide 8, are just going to be just showing how they spread across the world, especially Europe. There on the left, they are Bronze Age. That's actually a Bronze Age wood carving. Well, it's a 19th century wood carving of Bronze Age artifacts. There at the top, we see a swastika on the hilt of a sword, which is an interesting place to put it. Also buttons, the rest are buttons. People are putting them on their buttons. We have both the swirly, these are more swirly types. But the swirls, like I say, will become apparent. But they're very interesting, very beautiful. It makes definitely my carving for jewellery get very interested in these things. Now now I'm going to have to get a pronunciation on this one. Duplajaja, I don't know, somewhere in Serbia. In the middle, if anybody can tell me how to pronounce that correctly, it'd be great. But anyway, these are, I'm just going to say, from Serbia. Well, they're mostly Serbia, but they're right on the border there. But as you can see now, there's a very interesting places of where those swastikas are there, which might give us a hint at some ideas of what they're doing. They're on her breasts and her womb, vagina, to be quite frank. And we're going to see some interesting stuff with that later, but that's where they've placed them, on this charioted woman. In the top right there, that is Indus Valley culture. They appear there. This about this time. They're two Indus Valley seals. The Indus Valley script, like the Vinca script, is still undeciphered. Nobody knows exactly what it means, and there's lots of opinions on it. And below right there, that is an Etruscan swastika. Now, it has ducks around it, birds, like I say, but these are water birds. Now, remember earlier we had the fish and the birds on the Sumerian, well, the Proto-Sumerian plates, and we also had the first swastika on a bird. So we're starting to see some things connect here. But that there, we've got the swirls too. But at the very top, there are three little ducks. I mean, it might be hard to see. It's hard for me to see, but hopefully you've got it on full screen. But that's Etruscan, I believe, from around... I've actually forgot the date on that. Sorry. I've got it somewhere, but I don't believe I've written it down. Nope. The swastika is still spreading out. We're going a bit forward in time. That one there in the bottom right, that beautiful swastika with the birds on the ends of it again. Ducks, water birds by the looks of it. That is actually from Iron Age Britain. It's an absolutely beautiful find in Iron Age Britain. One you won't see very often. It's very hard to find. You have to really dig to find some of these things. But it's an exceptionally beautiful example, but a very late example of the Iron Age. The top right there, that is a Thracian coin. We have a water bird, which looks like a swan on the one side and the swastika on the other. And this one on the left here, this bowl, that I believe is from the Czech Republic. It's from the Bronze Age. And it looks like it has waves around it. Now, so this is, again, now we're getting water and sky elements, as well as breasts and wombs. So this is what's confusing when you first look at these things. First, you're told it's just a solar wheel. So that's what you kind of think. As you start to dig, you start to see water birds and water motifs appear. You also start to see feminine subjects appear, but not necessarily feminine, not necessarily the goddess, but elements of her, like her breasts and womb, being highlighted or decorated with such things. So when we look forward, we have to start to look a little bit at what all these symbols are saying to us. Because a symbol doesn't necessarily have to be an object. In fact, it very rarely is. For example, the symbol of the boar doesn't just mean boar. I mean, that would be kind of that'd be just a word. Symbol is far deeper than that, is the essence of something. So we're going to look at what the essence of all these things are and have a few ideas and play with those in a little minute. But I am going to get onto some words first, just to have a little basic look at the words. But before I do that, I'm going to get a drink and I'm going to play, hopefully play, let's just make sure I've got it set up. A beautiful song by Olivia Key. She's released a new song today. I'll put a description in the... I'll put a link in the description. That would be a better way to say it. At the end of the show. And also a little song from Hallinder. So I'm going to just get off now. And just get a cup of water or a cup of tea maybe, if I've got time maybe. And I'll leave you with some beautiful music for 5 minutes. Oh, I better change the screen first. How about that, huh?
I know none of this is easy. easy, that the future could go up in flames when the struggle is too heavy. I resolve to embrace, I will not give up and I will not give in. They can sink my ships, and if I have to, I'll swim. There is nothing I would not do. I would give my life to keep you safe and overcome this with grace. And overcome this with grace. I will not give up and I will not give in. They can sink my ships, and if I have to, I'll swim. There is nothing I would not do. I would give my life to keep you safe and overcome this with grace. I will not give up and I will not give in. They can sink my ships, and if I have to, I'll swim. There is nothing I would not do. I would give my life to keep you safe and overcome this with grace. I would give my life to keep you safe.
Master of the lightnings, rider on the storm, wearer of a crown of swords, spinner out of fate. Who thinks he turns the wheel of time may learn the truth too late.
Do you still remember who you are? Do you remember your blood?
Welcome back. I believe I've turned my mic on. I have. And that was With Grace by Olivia Key, who is a fellow heathen and a brave lady that has come out with her own name to our cause, such as the heathen stance. And also there we had our very own Hallinder with The Weave, a beautiful little ditty he made there that will be on his new album that I'm going to be working with him a little bit on. Now, I'd just like to add before I move on, because it's going to be a bit of a shorter stream, I hope. I might be able to take a few questions at the end, but I will save them to the end so I can actually look at the questions as they come up. It'll make it a little bit easier for me than having to get other people over to sort the questions for me. But we'll see how it goes for time. Now, like I say, now we're going to move on to the words now. We're going to have a little look at the words. Words are something that intrigue me, and I can spend days lost in them. And it's something... Oh, no. Hold up. I think we've got the slides in a little bit of a wrong order there. That's my fault. No, but we're going to look at the words here, and I forgot to add a word there, but it doesn't matter. I can add it myself. Now, this is something that I'm going to go through a little bit, and I want to know, it'd be interesting to get to know at the end, I'll ask you, if you'd be interested in looking at the words more deeply, because to explain them in their proper context, I would need to do specific diagrams, and it would take a lot of time and effort, and I was wondering if people would be interested, but I suppose we'll start. But we're going to keep it very basic today. And the word we're missing there, of course, is swastika. But I can go through that for you anyway. Everybody knows what it looks like, right? Well, basically, the simple meaning of swastika is to be well. That's its given meaning. And there's also svasti, which is good luck, be well, which is a very similar word. Also mean bard, actually, interestingly. And it can mean a lot of things. Good luck, fortune, being well, being home, belonging. This is why I need to do a complete show on the words alone. There is so much context to the words. And it's a place I always look when I'm lost. As I said in the intro there, from a word to a word, I was led to a word, and words do indeed lead to words, and you can get lost on quite a magnificent trail. But it's interesting that the Sanskrit word, now just before I move on to Westpuhal there, we will have a look at the etymology. If you go back to the Proto-Indo-European word for where the well comes from, to be well, of the swastika, it's actually the beginning of it in the Sanskrit, and it comes from a Proto-Indo-European su, basically a su. Now, in the Celtic, this has some very interesting connections, and one being Isus. Some of you may know him as a Celtic deity, explained by, I believe it was Roman writers, or possibly Greek. I haven't written it down, so I'm working off memory here. I think it might be a Greek writer, but around Roman times, of a god who hung from a tree and got hit by sticks. Isus. Now there's the same essentially origin, etymological origin, as well in the be well of the swastika. Also, we have Wessus, another Proto-Celtic word, which means noble. Which is probably where Isus gets his name from, but the Wessus comes through being noble. And there's a very interesting connection, which we'll probably look at a little bit later, in a bit more detail, of Sulis. Now, people don't etymologically link this word, but it has a su at the beginning. And this very interesting goddess, because she is a sun goddess, by all accounts, yet she presides over a watery area. Now, earlier we saw the sun and the water possibly linked with the swastika. We're going to take a look at that in a bit more detail, but it could help us unravel Sulis, a very mysterious goddess from Britain in the famous town of Bath, where we have the famous Roman baths. That still produces a warm spring, which will connect us to other things as well, which is, like I say, the words can lead you places and show you things that you don't always know. But it's interested in the Old Anglo-Saxon greeting for hello or goodbye, and also where we get wassail from. It means the same thing, exactly the same as the swastika. You could say swastika if you were in India, Sanskrit, as you could say Wesuhal. Now, I don't find that a coincidence, and it's definitely not because I have the word hal in there. Now, word hal, just got to get some up, as you can see there, comes from the Proto-Germanic. Those three words at the bottom, they're all Proto-Germanic words, and that is halas, complete, whole, healthy. And that's where we get to be well. Halagas, holy, sacred, that's the active, that's an adjective of halas, of doing, of being. So being complete, being whole, being healthy is holy and it's sacred, which has some interesting implications on ethnicity, right? But we'll leave that one for now. And also we have Haliana. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, it's Proto-Germanic. To heal, to mend is where we get healing from, and things like that, words like that. So those are all interesting. And halas, by the way, as well, there's another little interesting connection which we're going to get into when we get into the next slide. It's Proto-Germanic origin, but also can lead, if you go back to the Pi and then come back forward to the Proto-Celtic, you get words for omen, or ominous, which is going to make sense when we go to the next slide. Well, now, hal is translated in modern English to well, just as the Sanskrit swastika, the su part. Now, whilst they're translated, they're still ancient words, and they still connect very interestingly to the subject matter at hand. We have well, to be well, actually originates in a word for to choose, which is a very interesting way for that etymology to exist. And that links us to many words. I did an article on Velida, a prophetess, a seeress of the Germanic peoples. And her name leads to very similar things because you have to see it, to choose, to want, to see. And it's interesting that sul, in Old Irish, a word that we mentioned earlier with sulis, can also mean eye, to see. So some very interesting connections there. We also, like, there's weles, a seer, a prophet. Wilitan, which is weles is a Proto-Germanic word, and wilitan is an Old English word to look, behold. Now, they aren't necessarily directly connected, obviously, because these come through well. And we also have a well, a spring, water aspects, the swirls of the spring, as you can see in the background of that picture a little bit. Like I say, now, I could go into these words a lot deeper. And we could go all over the place with them and make a lot of connections. Anybody wants to see a little example of that, and I'll put a link in the description when I finish. Check out the article I did called Velida. I forgot exactly what I called it now. I don't have it up, I don't believe, no. But I did an article about Velida. You'll find it in history, in the article section. Historic. Maybe even. No, just historic. And you'll see what I mean about words coming together. But I'd be more than happy to do a show on the words around swastika in a lot more detail. What I'm trying to show now is just some interesting aspects, some real basics with it. Like, so the main basics is to be well. I mean, that's the real essence of it. In the basic words, like I say. Now I've got to find my place here on my slides because I'm all over the place. And it's just interesting that the swastika and hal are intimately linked, like I say. very similar. Although they sound very different and come from a different etymological root, they're pretty easy transferable and translatable as the same word. Similar with well, obviously, as in Westbuhal, well, hail, are translated there. And that's all I wanted to touch on with the words, just a little bit of interest and intrigue. And like I say, this is the basics show on the swastika, so most people don't know that the swastika means to be well. And anybody that's ever mailed me will know that I always sign off my mails with be well. And actually, it's an interesting, just before I move on, it's an interesting way to do it. Because before I did that before I knew any of this. I did it many years ago. When my partner actually told me that by saying take care was a negative. I was telling people that there was danger ahead. So saying take care, I'm assuming danger. Whereas a better way to express yourself is be well, because be well anticipates good harmony. Be well. So I started using it out of interest because I thought it was a much better way to sign off or say goodbye to somebody. And then much later, I realised that so did my ancestors, my Anglo-Saxon ancestors, and obviously anybody that hailed each other in ancient times. And like I say, it's a much more positive way of expressing it. Like I say, Westbuhal in its different forms can be hello or goodbye. And Wasal is a drink to health. So they're all they all come around about the same. So now we're going to get to the last slide where I'm going to talk a little bit on, and then I'll try and take a few questions. Like I said, this is a shorter stream than normal, and I do apologise for that, but I've got a lot on, and I had to keep this really within the realms of not only what I already knew, but what I could explain with some reasonable effort with short time. Oh, I've got to go back, haven't I? Because we skipped a thing. Now, the eternal life force. It says at the top. Like I said earlier, we're trying to bring, from the archaeological side, we're going to try and bring these symbols together. Now, in the bottom right there, that's another chariot. This time with the front end. On the front end of this one, you can see 3 ducks. You might remember the ducks from earlier, or the swans, water birds. But if you see at the top of that image there, you'll see that underneath the goddess that's riding this chariot is a sun, a solar disk. That lady does not have swastikas on her breasts or a womb, but she has swirls instead. So we see there that they're almost interchangeable. With these chariots, we get both swastikas or swirls, it depends. That goddess form, by the way, is very common along this area. That form in the very centre there with a swastika at the womb is from Troy, apparently, in Greece. It has a swastika at the womb. It has long-necked birds. And also it even has... No, sorry, that's from Crete, not Troy. Is that one from Crete or Troy? I forgot now. But it might be from Crete. And that one has a double axe as well, a little bit lower than the womb, which, as we spoke about the Minoan culture, especially the Cretan island Crete, or the Cretans, the Cretes, the double-headed axe was very important. And actually, when I was looking through this, I found many goddess symbols like this that didn't have a swastika but had all the symbols that I was talking about last week. It was very, very interesting, but I got lost on that tangent a little bit, and I had to get this show together, and I got to keep my brain focused, which is something I struggle. It goes all over the place. But there we see her breasts, and we see the spirals too above them. Now there in the top right, that is apparently Artemis. It's from Greeks, clearly. She has birds, fish on her dress, and swastikas all around her, as well as bulls' heads and possibly dogs with spiral tails. Now Artemis is obviously the twin sister of Apollo, which we see in the top left there. Although Apollo is looking slightly feminine in that drawing and has circles over his breasts, he has a swastika where his womb would be on the others. So I'm not sure what's going on with Apollo there, but it's apparently Apollo, but he's got some of the same symbols that we're seeing on these goddess figures. So again, an association with the sun, association with the womb, association with the breast, association with water. So what do we make of all of this? Now, like I say, many people would just see the swastika as a sun disk. Yeah. Well, I don't believe it means the sun. And like I say, I'm just going to keep the basics here. We're not going to go into too much detail. I don't believe it's the sun. And I don't believe it's the springs. And I don't believe it's a mother goddess. And I don't believe it's the womb. I believe this is something that can describe these things. This symbol can apply to all of them. That would make more sense, because we see them applied to all of them by our ancestors and by these ancient peoples. So what could they be expressing? Well, the sun rises every day, and it goes down, and then it rises again. It is eternal. It has a cycle. Not only is it a cycle, but it is a giver of life. It is the essence of the giver of life. Without the sun, there would be no life. So we have an eternal nature, which is almost predicted, is almost obvious in the symbol of even the swirl or the swastika, this spiral, this continuation. But also we have an essence there of health, giving life, nurture, to make whole. The whole cycle, right? Of birth and life and rebirth. The womb was definitely seen in ancient times, and even in more modern times, even Viking era. It's interesting that some people have noticed that some of the doors up on Christian temples that were Celtic Christian, Viking, the stave churches, are phallic in design. Well, why would you have a phallus as a door? Where's the phallus going? And without getting too crude, the womb. So the holy place, the afterlife becomes the womb, and the phallus, your penetration into the womb for rebirth. So a continuous cycle there. And earlier we saw the swastika on the hilt of the sword, honouring that cycle in battle of life and death. And there we see it at the womb in the centre one from Crete. But again, we have the water birds. How about the waters? Well, again, there, just like the breasts, we saw the breasts had the swastikas. They're nurturers. Yeah, the breasts nurture our young, our children. And the same with water. The spring is the safest place to drink, especially in ancient times, and this is something that cannot be ignored. And there is obviously a connection with the dead with water. The land of the living, with Artemis showing perfectly there. Land of the living, the water of the dead. We see this with temples. In fact, most early churches are built on Celtic sites, pre-Celtic sites, and they are built on islands because they're surrounded by the dead. They're a place of the living amongst the dead, and you can do the same with a pool that were venerated. Springs were venerated, wells, ancient wells in ancient times, because they're an essence of the dead within the living. And each gives life to the other. The ancestors give life. But we're not going to go too far. But I want to know that the nurturing and the life and death aspect of water, in fact, many of the words for death come from water, like murder, for example. Water. Moor, like moors or... I haven't written all this down. I'm trying to work from memory, and my memory's not great at this time in the morning. But they have a life and death cycle to it with water, the animation of water. And when you die, you dry up, the animation goes. So there we have the sun, the mother goddess essentially, and the waters. And like I said, the thing that they have in common is the eternal nature of life and existence, and the eternal well-being of that life and existence. So the swastika can apply to all of them because it is not a simple symbol of. It's not a word. It is a symbol. Like I say, the symbol of the boar does not just mean boar. Otherwise, it would just be the word boar. A symbol is far deeper. It's an essence that can be applied to other things. So in my opinion, it could easily be applied to the womb as it could the sun. It makes perfect sense to me. And they're just some of my thoughts on a basic look at it. Like I say, we could go a lot deeper. But like I say, I want to keep this one a little bit shorter. And I do want to try and see if I can get a few questions in at the end here. See if we can do any of that. So, if anybody does have any questions, fire away and I'll see what I can do. Other than that, I'll just see what's been said already. Yes, the Water of Birth, Shadow Witch. Very interesting. I was beginning to write an article on that a few years ago about the Tomb and the Womb. It got to about 7,000 words and I hadn't finished, and then I thought to myself, I need to chop this up. But I did mention a word earlier, wheel. Wheel is related to navy, naval. All right, there's lots there. And they're etymologically linked. But like I say, we'll have to save that for another time. Like I say, it was 7,000 words and I hadn't even finished. People talking about the swan. Yeah, the swan is a very, very interesting symbol. Notably in the Norse mythology, a symbol of transformation in very simple terms. The Valkyrie have swans' wings, or they're dressed as swans. Some people interpret that as swans' wings. There are loads of stories about swans, people being trapped as swans and then being rescued, being gold bracelets, etc. I forgot all the names, but there's so many about transformation, which obviously life to death or death to life is a transformation. When's your explanation for Troy Towns? I'm not sure what you mean there, Hendrickson. If you could just try and reword that and I'll have a go. And people are mentioning the Big Dipper, yes, and not just the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper. They're both swastikas, if you draw them correctly. Hendrickson, yes, Apollo has swans. Many do. Swan song. What's your swan song? Your last performance. Transformation again. Also, we have lyres. Swan neck lyres. Related to the Muses. And also buried in Anglo-Saxon graves. Every Anglo-Saxon king had a lyre. His swan song, his transformation. And good night, Spartan Warrior Queen, and thanks for being here. Dave Martell says, when am I coming on the bog? I'll have to check that out, Dave. I did get your mail and I've been meaning to get to it. So I've been very busy this week, and this is why a little bit of a shorter stream and a little bit... I've not rushed through it, I've just kept it simple. But I'll definitely mail you soon, mate. So don't worry about that. Old Germanic people have geocentric worldview. Like I say, I don't... I'd like to explore some sort. If we could keep it, but yeah, I mean, we could keep it on the subject here a little bit. The black sun symbol, that is related, and that's an interesting symbol actually. Something that I'd probably really need to do a lot more research into. Yes, fortune, glory. There are so many Germanic and Celtic stories of children being turned to swans, etc., and so on and so forth. The black sun could be a variant for sure of the swastika. Has a very interesting history. Depends what you want to call a black sun. And where that term comes from. I've looked into it a little bit, and it gets very esoteric very fast. Yes, many people have seen sun as the male and the moon as the female. In the north, we do not see that, and I'm not saying that they did or didn't in the east. Like I say, context is everything, and we don't have much context from these cultures. We just have their artifacts. It's very hard we have to speculate to a large extent, and use our knowledge to make that as accurate as possible. But I'm not saying, like I say, I'm presenting information here. I have my own personal beliefs, but I keep my personal beliefs personal. Because I believe them, and I know that it takes a certain amount of leap of faith to believe them. I can feel them because of certain experiences I've had, but you might not have had those experiences, so you might not feel the same way. And like I say, it's a personal journey, and I really would, rather than tell everybody what to think, I'd rather that they engage with the subject matter and really make the connection themselves. There is also the idea of the mythic, with the female male. If the swastika is a whole symbol, as said by the words, then it kind of makes sense that Artemis and Apollo are twins. We have Frey and Freya in the north. That they would be connected in some way as part of the same. We know Hamitic leaders were seen as quite important in Egyptian times, for example, in ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, there are many representations of pharaohs dressed in women's clothing. Now, these were not transvestites. It's very symbolic. It's to say that they're a balance, that they're whole. And to be a leader, you need to have both masculine and feminine qualities to lead the folk properly. And that's what that was a representation of. So to say it's feminine or male would be kind of silly when it's a holistic symbol. For sure, it's a whole symbol. Sorry if I'm missing some of this, but I'm trying to keep up. What did I think the Germans thought of them? Well, in World War II, which interesting that you used a Siegel as well as the swastika, so they definitely had some knowledge, right? They knew what they were doing to a point. Somebody asked, why are swans and Valkyrie? I'm assuming, what do swans and Valkyrie have in common? Well, swans are related intimately to the Odysseia, which the Valkyrie are of, and the Valkyrie are often described many times as wearing armor, swan armor, for want of a better word. This, by many artists, has been interpreted over the years as winged. And that's why we get winged. And that's why sometimes they're not winged, because it's not specifically wings that they're talking about. It's just swan armor. And like I say, there's many artistic representations of the Odysseia, etc., with their swans swimming, normally always around them. And the Norns, etc., as their dealers of fate, right? Transformation from life to death to life. So there's a lot of connections with the swans and all the female deities and all the female divine aspects of the North. To Honkler games, yes, possibly the active essence. So, like I say, I mean, we're looking at very generally here. We could go into each of the things that I've mentioned in great depth, actually. So we could explain it in great depth, each and everything we're touching on here, the swirl, the swastika, but they're all interconnected. Yes, Freya does, yes. Have a swan suit, sorry. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting the things here. I've got a question here. This is sending one from somewhere else. How would you explain all cultures around the world adopting the swastika symbol? That's a really good question. How would I explain all the cultures adopting a symbol? Well, we can see that it starts to spread around 4000 BC, at least on the archaeological record. Like I say, it could be much earlier. We just don't have it. But it's in it. I suppose the concept of it could be explained in a manner that most people could get, and somebody with a high culture explaining things, possibly. Trade. We know, I mean, those chariots that I showed you from Serbia, there are some almost identical, well, very Chinese, but they have birds at the front and swastikas all around them. And I know we had ancient Celts over there going down there, or, ancient Europeans, let's put it that way. So the Europeans were known to be great traders. The Vikings were great traders. Could be that we passed our symbols on like that. I mean, who knows? Like I say, it would take a it'd take a full show to even go into that subject in full. But thanks for the question. The Hussars were Valkyrie-like, and that's why they had swan wings. But the dealers of death definitely dealers of transformation. So swan wings would be okay. I don't know, Hendrickson, about the Hussars fully. But they're definitely dealers in death, so they're dealers in transformation. So it could possibly be a link. But like I say, I mean, as I said, each culture that I've briefly touched over today, and I said this last week, and I'll just reiterate, everything needs looking at in its own right. When I overview something like this, even on a personal level, I know I've got a fraction of the story. Tiny, tiny, tiny bit. And it's great to overview. It can give you a general picture. But if you really want to know more, you've got to really look at each aspect individually. And really try and find, because sometimes where you think there's connections, there's not. And where you don't think there's a connection, there is. And I've been caught by that myself. And that's why I always like to review everything I do before I put it out again, even if I'm talking about the same subject. Because of the knowledge that I've gained over a year, 5 years, since I last looked at it, can change my whole perception of that. And I'm the lens, and you're the lens, and we can only take in what we're privy to, what we can, what our lens is capable of. And the more knowledge we acquire, the more we can take in. And so it's always good to look at everything as fine a detail as you can. Swastika is on 4's belt in paintings, and 4 is slightly associated with the solar disc, especially if you go back to the Nordic Bronze Age. The hammer even itself sometimes, but again, that's no relation of swastika to black sun diagram. Well, like I say, the black sun is very strange. It's very esoteric, very fast. Depends what you want to call a black sun. There's the finds in the Ukraine, I believe, or somewhere in Eastern Europe, where they have what we call a black sun with the many arms. But as I showed you there in this slide here, there's a many-armed one from Crete. And I know that they have another black sun has a slightly different. But like I say, it's very complicated, very fast for the black sun, because it's very hard to trace as a symbol, because the swastika is very easy. We can see it in its many forms. The black sun is very distinctive, and it's only called a black sun very late. So it's what you class as a black sun. Hendrickson, possibly. Apollo there does have the swastika on his chest. Again, it's a term that can be applied to something like brave or noble, but deeper than that, it's a symbol. So our ancestors would apply it if they believe all the requirements were met, I would assume. But like I said, there is a picture of Apollo on the left there. And they clearly have, although they look very feminine to me, I'm unsure what the artist is trying to portray there. Maybe a Hamitic nature. Black sun is ancient, but broad sun wheel. Well, like I say, I haven't looked into it too much detail. I've looked into the black sun a bit. But it looks 20th century, from when I could see, it's been called the Black Sun. Same with the swastika. The swastika was the swastika, to be well, whole, complete. All these other interpretations, like sun wheel or anything, are kind of much later. Yeah, people saying swastika, car being breath. I've heard that before. I mean, like I say, we had a basic look at the word swastika today. But anyway, I think the questions are going a little bit round in circles about the black sun. Like I say, I'd need to have a proper look at it, and I have had a little look at it, but you'd have to really Troy towns or turf mazes, also called Troyerberg. I'd need to know more information. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Hendrickson. Sorry, but anyway, if you give me more information, Hendrickson, I'll try and send me a mail, and with some information, I'll give you an opinion. All right. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and thanks for the questions. They were interesting. I'm going to get off now and get some sleep soon. I'm a bit tired. I got a lot to do. Like I say, thanks for being here as always, and I'll catch you next week. Bye for now.